Hello, fans. Welcome to another source, another time, another period of In the Minute. Now, as you notice, Donna Hopkins and I have been doing this show by herself, but she hasn't been holding up her side of it. I don't like her picks. I don't like what she's saying. So she go out and get a great experienced person. Donna, who did you go bring in? You brought in a hitman for me, didn't you?
I sure did, Tony. I brought in someone because I brought in someone with some knowledge, Tony. David Harrison has reports for the CommandersCountry.com, Sports Illustrated Fan Nation, and then the host of Locked on the Commanders. So, Tony, he is the right person to bring in at this point of the season to talk about the Commanders, what's going on, what they should do moving forward, and as they finish the season, Tony. So we're going to jump right into this, Tony. So, David, welcome aboard In the Minute podcast, where we basically just say what we want in that minute.
No, I appreciate that. What an introduction. I appreciate both of you. You're too kind, I swear.
Yeah, but Tony, I want to hop in and the Pro Bowl picks came out on yesterday, and guess who was at the top of the list? Montez Sweat, named to the Pro Bowl, Tony.
Yes.
And he's, since going to Chicago, he's made them a better defense, Tony. Montez, Sweat, 12.5 sacks through 17 games, Tony, ranked third in the NFC. He leads both the Bears at 6.0 and the Commanders at 6.5. And if he keeps this right here, he'll be the first time in history to do this, Tony, being with two different teams and leading the two different teams. I constantly say, that if they had to keep one player, defensive end that they let go between Chase Young and Montez Sweat should have been the one that they should have kept. And it tells with him and what he's doing up to Chicago. Tony, you and David jump in on the Pro Bowl pick.
Well, I like that pick because I tell you what, Montez was playing well before he left here. And I'm sure David would also say that at the same time, for him to go to another team and make not the defense better, make the whole team better. He showed his worth. It could have been a person that was being here. And Dave, you can jump in anytime. I look at it, when they started getting rid of defensive linemen, you got four number ones. To me, the only practical way, if you feel like you got to get rid of two of them, is you get rid of one at each position. You don't get rid of two pass rushers, your two leading rushers on the team. Then they go elsewhere. Chase is doing okay out in San Francisco because he was kind of the backup man to the star out there anyway in college. So therefore, he's fitting right in. Both of those players, we would be talking possibly playoffs had they kept them here. We would be saying, get rid of the coordinator if you think it's wrong. Get rid of this person, that person. But Dave, you tell me what you think about it.
Tony, I don't know if they would have been going to the Super Bowl or the playoffs if they kept those two players, because they was tripping over their own feet still. But go on, Tony.
Oh, that's what you think. But they had to have time. See, they had to make a decision. And David, you take a look at this. Had you been general manager and you had to get rid of one or two of your defensive linemen, tell me what you would have thought.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Tony. Whereas getting rid of one of them, you kind of saw the writing on the wall, and there's two really kind of separate conversations to this. I think and one of those is how you're going to move into the future versus how you want to maintain this current roster. I think moving into the future, I think the organization probably understood we're not going to pay both of these guys. So if we're not going to pay them both, let's go ahead and move at least one of them and go get what we can now, instead of trying to hope for a compensatory pick in 2025 if they sign a big contract elsewhere. And so for me, that means you're probably shopping Chase Young outside of Washington. He really still had kind of this game changer kind of reputation out there, even though that wasn't really what we saw with the Washington Commanders for the most part during his career. Part of that due to the injury, of course, but you go out there, maybe you get a third round pick for him this year. And then to me, you keep Montez Sweat. Like you both kind of already said, like he was the most consistent defensive end on this roster since before Chase Young was a part of it. So I think that because of that, you keep Montez Sweat and you try to work out the long-term deal with him and see what you can get done there. Because at the end of the day, with all the problems that the Washington Commanders had, even after coming out of that midseason loss to the Philadelphia Eagles, you needed more consistency on the back end of things. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody smart on football say the way you make your secondary better is by lessening your pass rush. And even though the pass rush wasn't exactly the best in the NFL at the time with Chase and Montez, it certainly wasn't going to get better without them. And with so much inconsistency in the secondary already, getting rid of those two pass rushers is only going to make the job harder on the back end. And I think that's what we saw, going down the rest of the season. And it's a morale hit. You know what I mean? If you get rid of both those guys, the players all said the right things. The coaches all said the right things. But the aesthetics of it are, we're kind of throwing in the towel on our defense this season. And if you're throwing in the towel on their defense, you're really throwing in the towel on the whole season, because I don't care who you look at from Super Bowl histories past, most of them have at least an average defense, if not one of the best in the league. And when you're already struggling on defense, getting rid of two of their most impactful players on a struggling defense, you're only going to make it worse.
Hey, David hit it on the head, because he said that they literally threw in the towel because they weren't going to be better without these two players when you got rid of them. So what were you saying right there? And we were still in the meat of the season. And as you say, Tony, possibly making a playoff run. You had better chance with them being here. And then after they leave, they get worse. The defense did. But another player, Tony, when we're talking about the Commanders let go, and the Commanders, when you look across the board, have let go a lot of key players that's playing for other teams. The Commanders just played the 49ers. Remember Trent Williams? Trent Williams. Well, Tony, he was selected to his 11th Pro Bowl, becoming the 8th offensive lineman ever at that, to make it at least 11 times. Another player, Tony, that the Commanders, and we talk about the offensive line problems, another Commander that got away, that they let get away, as Trent said when I talked to him, they dubbed him away for literally nothing. Another Pro Bowl prospect, another Pro Bowl guy that Washington still could have had. Your assessment of just, you got Sweat making the Pro Bowl, you got Trent Williams making the Pro Bowl 11th time.
And you think about that, they're saying right now that Trent still is not, if not the best, one of the best tackles in the game. And you can see that by the way he played with San Francisco. And then you look around the league, Sheriff is out there starting on the team right now. You got the other offensive tackle starting. You start looking at the individuals that they have shipped away. So it makes me start to think about, yes, Dave, they were not doing as much as they could have done when they all were here, but at the same time, it was what they presented. When you have 4 number ones out there, you have to double somebody. You have to single somebody. So you make that decision. And that's what was making it hard. Now they just know if they double the 2 guys in the middle, that they'll have the job done. Both of those guys like to do swims outside. So running up the middle is always going to be a possibility. If you'll notice since the trade, that middle have been wide open at times. So you look at that. But as we said, you got Williams out there, and I hate to say this, Donna, but the Commanders didn't trade him away. The Redskins did. And if you start taking a look at it, it made that mistake often and early.
Organization, you just playing with names.
And so, you did take a look at it. Now, Dave, as this season came in, everybody had high expectations because they had been similar to years that they were doing better. Year before last, they got into the playoffs. Then you had the sickness. Then you had the injury. And I can look at Chase. The reason they were looking at Chase, he came in here supposed to be a big item. I never saw him look like Dexter Manley to me or Charles Mann. So I tell you, he did not live up to his building, but at the same time, he was not as good at this time as they thought. And they were always worried about injury. But I just can't get over Sweat because here's a guy that played up and down the line, both defensive ends, played well at both of them, 6.5 sacks, leading the team. He goes 6 more and gets 6 more for Chicago. My other team, so he and I played on the same teams together on a couple of them. But at the same time, I can't understand that. So I look at this whole team and I look at what they have to do in this off season. Like I said, everybody they let go didn't make it around to the Pro Bowl, but most of them are starters in the league, people that could be here. And when I look at that, I said, now you got to start looking at the organization and things that transpired in the past, and you got to fix that first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really what it boils down to is organizational decisions up and down the roster. You know what I mean? If you look through the draft history for this team and where they're getting the most bang for their buck and where they're missing out on guys. I mean, Chase Young is not the only first round pick that the Ron Rivera tenure has brought in that hasn't worked out. Jamin Davis hasn't really been an impactful player the way that they want him to be. I mean, they brought him in here to be an off-ball Mike linebacker. He's not playing that position because he wasn't effective there, and he's not totally effective playing the weak side role or sometimes on the strong side. And then you look at Jahan Dotson, and certainly there's a lot of talent there, but this year, whether it's from scheme, whether it's a quarterback connection, whatever it is, they're not getting the return on investment on their first round pick 2 years in. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter why it's happening. The fact of the matter is it's happening. And then you have Emmanuel Forbes, who gets benched, partway through his rookie season. And, whether it's fair or not in today's NFL, your first round picks are expected essentially to be or become starters at some point in the season. And that might put more pressure on the talent evaluators and the coaches and the players themselves. But that's kind of the environment, that they're operating in. And you just kind of have to be aware of your operating environment. And you either have to accept it, take it head on and find solutions, or I don't know, find a different profession. You know what I mean? If it's too hot in that kitchen, then find a different job. And I think that, Tony, when you look at the failure of the first round draft picks on the defensive line, because ultimately that's going to be the story that's written about those four guys, is that it was an experience or an experiment that didn't work out. You also have to look at the coaches, and this as well as I do. Like, those four guys, you want to put 4 first round draft picks up there, and I think that basically the mentality of it was, your 4 first round draft picks, go do the job. You don't need help. You're 4 first round guys. That's why you're here. But as a leader, as a coach, if you see your 4 guys need help, go give them some help, and give them some help from the middle part of that defense, because again, that back end is too valuable. So you need to bring help from the middle end, bring those blitzing linebackers, bring a safety like Cam Curl on some blitzes and things, make the offensive line address those 4 players, but have to account for 5 or 6 every single snap, because you're mixing things up. And we never really saw that from the Jack Del Rio defense on a consistent basis. And then once the trade happened, I mean, if you're going to make this happen with James Smith-Williams, Casey Toohill, KJ Henry, and Andre Jones Jr., you got to bring help. You got to play games. You got to bring twists, stunts, different looks. I've seen defenses in the NFL put a safety over the center and blitz that way. I mean, literally putting a safety at the 0. You know what I mean? You have to do things to mix things up for that offensive line and make them have to react to what you're doing. And we just never saw it from the Washington Commanders defense. And I think that's why those four first round picks don't work out. And I think that's why we have a new defense coming in 2024, wherever it comes from, to see if they can get this thing fixed.
Hey, David, I didn't even see speaking of the talent across the defensive line and on the defensive side of the ball, that, like you said, you had 4 number 1 draft picks on that defensive line. So you thought, oh man, we are set for this season. And then you had talent in the secondary with St-Juste, which I think that they played him in the wrong position. You had Kendall Fuller, and then you had Cam Curl, who I hope that they sign back, but we don't know how that's going to play out. So when you look at the scope of this defense overall, it was a defense on paper with talent, and it's talent there. But like you said, I don't think that they utilized that talent right. First of all, they had the wrong defensive back coach when they got rid of Chris, and they brought in a guy that was kind of like clueless in putting those guys in the right position. So I think that they wasted a whole year with the talent that they had that didn't materialize on the field. And you look at it, Tony, it's solid players on the defensive side of the ball. They just did not play up to speed. A lot of people are saying now, when you look at rebuilding this team, and it's a lot of changes going to take place, do you get rid of a John Allen so that you can kind of like reshuffle that defense again, him and Payne? Who do you keep on the defense? Is Allen a guy that you have to keep, or is Allen a guy that you should basically look at what can I get for him? And both you and David can talk about this. Who should you keep? Who should you let go? Is Allen one of those guys you can afford to let go? He didn't play up to his capabilities, I think, this year for probably many reasons, but is he a guy that you let go?
Well, you know what, Johnny, you said something very important when you said they were very good defensive linemen. They had the potential to be very good defensive linemen. The coach didn't know how to make them get over that mark. All of us that come in, I came in, I played 14 years. I was not the same at the end of my career as I was at the beginning, but I had the knowledge. And if they had the knowledge, if I got 4 number 1 draft choices, I don't look at they can beat everybody one-on-one, because schematically they would change their blocking to make sure that we're not one-on-one. So what you have to do is look at your talent and look what they can do as a group as well as single one-on-one. That's where the big mistake was made. Also, if you look at the decision that was made, obviously we weren't in the room, so we do not know. But at the same time, you wonder, it must have had to be a decision, do the coach go or do the players go? So then they look at Sweat. They say, okay, we can get a number 2 for him right now. Okay, he got 6.5 sacks. He may not get more than that this year. And then they had to take a look at their superstars Chase and say, well, will he play a whole year for? But they look at the coach. He got 2 other number 1 draft choices there, and they're not dominating. I tell you what, I've been on teams that we weren't none of them number 1 draft choices, maybe 1 or 2, but we dominated. It's not about where you're taking, it's what you do. And so that tells me that not only did the player not know what he had to accomplish, it was also the coaching. And so they had to make a decision in the middle of which one do we get rid of, and you see how that worked out. They got rid of the players first, and then the coach. I would have like to see it go the other way since Ron took over, and he's a defensive specialist from in the past, and he played it in the Super Bowl. I would like to see him take over with those 4 number 1s and go out there and see what they can do. You can't just always say they got potential; they got to play, and a lot of times they got to play. My defensive line coach was Rich Sherman, and Bill Parcells. They was 2 of my people up in New England. They looked at me and they said, okay, you can't play a 3-man line every play because you only weigh 249, 250. But what we're going to do is they made a Tony defense, and they let me go where I want. That's coaching.
That's putting you in the right position, right, Tony?
Exactly. And see, that's what did not happen here. Anytime you got 4 number 1s on the line of scrimmage, they got to dominate some kind of way. You cannot dominate. And we saw they didn't do that. They'd have their games and everything. And now, as you can see, you talking about Allen. I would have to put a fire on Allen because he hasn't been the same since the fight on the sideline to me. And I don't know if it has anything to do with it or they can play together. But at the same time, you kept the 2 defensive tackles, and now you got to build around them. Those ends will be pretty good and everything. But first and foremost, here we go and digress back to got to go and make sure you got the right coaching staff in there.
Well, David, back to you. So do they keep Allen? And this is the thing that I look at. When I talk to the 49ers in that locker room, Chris McCaffrey talked about this team, the 49ers, them being on the same page, them wanting to make sure that they're all where they're supposed to be, as far as they, putting all the pieces together and how they make everybody accountable and then they make themselves accountable. I didn't see that with this Commanders team. Where were the broken pieces? Because although it was talent there, I never saw them clicking. Although they said they like each other, they were never on the same page. Again, do they keep an Allen, or what needs to break up in moving forward? Because this is rebuilding again.
Yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, you kind of leave that up to John Allen. And Tony, I love everything that you just said, especially because we get so wrapped up on the outside right now talking about culture. We always talk about the culture of an organization, the culture of this, the culture of that. But the culture, and while the culture is important, don't get me wrong, what's almost equally important, maybe even more important, is the plan. And do we have a plan? Do we have an identity? Who are we as a team? And even coming into their 4th season, I don't think that Ron Rivera, Jack Del Rio specifically had an identity on this defense, because we look at this team, Tony and Donna, and what have we seen the last 2 years with one player specifically, Benjamin St-Juste? They don't know where to play him. In 2022, they start him off in training camp preseason in the slot. That's where Chris Harris is doing most of his work. And Don, that's who you were talking about, Coach Chris Harris, who unfortunately left and went to Tennessee. And I think that is a criminally underrated thing that happened to this team in the offseason. I don't think everybody understands just how important Chris Harris was as that secondary coach. And they put Benjamin St-Juste in the slot starting in 2022. He's drafted basically as an outside cornerback. I looked at him at the Senior Bowl as almost a free safety type, and they end up putting him in the slot. Those are 3 incredibly different positions to play, even though they're all in the secondary. They all have different tools and different assets that you need. So they start him out there. William Jackson doesn't work out, so they kick him back outside, and he makes tremendous growth doing that in 2022 and up until the point where he ends up getting injured at the end of the season. But coming into the offseason, you look at Benjamin St-Juste, say, man, that dude can be a really solid zone perimeter defender. What do they do in 2023? They draft Emmanuel Forbes, and immediately that tells you they're moving Benjamin St-Juste back inside. So they do that. We see this cross-training where Ben is getting slot reps, he's getting perimeter reps, and then the season comes, Emmanuel Forbes doesn't come out. Where does Ben end up? right back outside. So this team doesn't have a plan from the coaching staff. It's hard for them to really buy into a plan inside the locker room. Then you get to the next level of this thing. And Jahan Dotson, a second-year wide receiver, actually said this in the locker room on Wednesday. It's on the players to bring everything together. It's on the players to bring that intensity, because it's not enough to have talent. It's not enough to even know your playbook and to like each other. There's got to be a fire. There's got to be a dog in that room, and there's not enough dogs in that locker room right now. And what are dogs? Dogs are pack animals. Dogs aggress to each other. They come together. They click to each other. And I think when we talk about Jonathan Allen is very talented. Like, there's no denying that Jonathan Allen has the talent to be a really solid, dominant defensive tackle in the National Football League. The question for me for John Allen right now is, are you going to be a leader? Right? A lot of times we hear John Allen talk about, I know what I'm playing for. I know I'm doing my job. These guys got to come in and do theirs. And I understand that completely. But that is a very individualistic mindset. We need you to be a leader now. If you're going to be part of the solution in Washington, you've got to be that dog that brings the pack together. And if you're not going to be that, then it probably is time to move on, because regardless of his intention, he's the elder statesman in that locker room. He's the elder statesman on that line, in that defense. People are going to listen to him. He is going to impact what happens inside that roster. So if he's not willing to take on that role, it might just be time for the two of them to split up for both of their sake, so that John can go somewhere and maybe take on that lesser role like Chase Young did, where he's not expected to be the superstar, just go out there and be a talented individual. And Washington go set out on that mission to find the dog that's going to bring the pack together.
Hey, Tony, I hate to go back to the, your years. No, I don't. I don't hate to go back, because David said something, that dog mentality. It's not about me. It's about the team as a whole. So the Super Bowl years that you all won here in Washington, you all had all of those pieces. As far as the leaders, and that's something I haven't seen from this team, as far as who are the true leaders, because those are guys are going to be the ones that step up and make people accountable, like that 49ers, team, that when they talk about winning in the process of how all the pieces have to come together. And for this Commanders team, none of the pieces ever came together with Ron Rivera's 4 years here in Washington. Why have they been so broken overall? And not looking at just Dan Snyder, but we're talking about on the football end of it, not the culture, like David said. I'm almost sick of them talking about the culture. But on the football side of things, why did pieces never come together for a Ron Rivera? And I don't want them to just talk about always the quarterback, because he talked about that in his press conference, that if he had that quarterback, then you can tell. If he had that Alex Smith, then he may have not been the coach here. It may have been still Gruden, because that's the kind of quarterback you want to have in here. But can you stand on the fact that Rivera may have never had the quarterback? But I think it goes beyond that, because they fail in so many other areas outside of just the quarterback, as far as just player assessment, personnel, and all of that.
Well, I don't know if it was just player assessment or personality, and let's digress and go back to, you always look at the team and you look at the potential, and the first thing they got hung up on, we got 4 number 1 draft choices. As I keep on, and I hate to keep going back to New England, but the reason I do that is you had a 3-man line. Your highest guy on there may have been drafted 3rd round by another team, but you lead the league 2 out of 3 years in sacks. Not because we schematically, and what the coaches did was a lot of times, and Bill Parcells, I keep mentioning him, they let us make up our games. A guy named Ray Hamilton, who used to coach in the league for a long time as well, we made up a lot of our own games because we knew what we could do out there. So what I'm saying is coordination between the team, the position, and the coaches. And when they got out there and you got 4 number 1s, I'm not going to leave everybody one-on-one, because I can tell you right now, Trey loves to go upside, and he always going to peek inside some kind of way, because he loves to that's his favorite move. So I know right now, if I have a quarterback that's mobile, I'm going out to my left, because I know Trey is going to come inside, and I'm going to get that corner. He does it over and over again. That was up to his coach to say, Trey, never let him get to your outside shoulder. Always keep him on your inside shoulder, and they'll never get outside of you. That's just basic football. So what I say is, maybe the coaching wasn't what it should have been. Maybe we shouldn't even have to worry about the quarterback.
Not should have been. It wasn't.
Well, You know,
Just call it
and
like it is.
they were experimenting. See, I hate to, you know, the one thing about it, and it's been said in this conversation prior, the coaches can only put us in position to win. We have to want to win. And I can, you know, just think about the excuses we made for this team the last 3 years. And the one that we made 2 years, okay, the first year, they didn't look like they were in great shape. The defense didn't hold on the way. The next year, Ron was sick. So, you know, he did the best he could do, and the defense did what it do. This year, well, we had to get rid of 2 of our major guys because we didn't want to pay them in the future. No, that's bull. If you are doing your job, you will pay those players because you can't get a solid defensive line in this league, and you can't get a Super Bowl team, as Dave said, that you don't have a good defensive line. So, you know, you look at it was the whole deal. Go back to Snyder. Even when he came in, he changed the whole format here as a Redskin fan and player. He didn't let certain players come in. He wanted this, he wanted that. I'm not going to put him down now that they're gone, but at the same time, it all began back then. I was a uniform inspector for 28 years, so I saw this up close. But what bothers me about the whole thing is when it comes down to it, if you're getting paid like a number one, you need to play like a number one. If you're not, you don't need to get paid like one. That's the bottom line. Don't give me the coaches. Don't give me the organization. If those organization coaches were there before you even got in. So that's bull. If you were going to be a number one, then you're going to talk the walk. But, you know, actions speak louder than words. I can say, oh, we got to do better. We do better. It's up to you. Each every man need to look in the mirror. That's how you're going to get there. Not talking about who didn't or why didn't or I'm going to do this. No, get the job done. Just like I can look at Chase and tell you're going to peek inside anytime. So I'm going to fake a run, pull you inside and get outside where my quarterback can stand up and wait. That's simple football. So, you know, it is on both sides. But the bottom line, as I said, if you're going to be paid like a number one, play like one.
Well, Tony, none of them got the job done, from the coaching to the players. But for 4 years, David, Coach Ron Rivera did not, on the football side, succeed. Why did he fail? And I don't want to talk about, like I said, just the quarterback, but why did he fail overall? Tony hit something earlier when he said that Ron Rivera was a defensive person. So he said that he was going to be more involved with the defense this year. I didn't see that happening, even him taking over after he got rid of Jack Del Rio. Why was he not successful here in Washington? And, you know, he spoke a lot about just culture, but he never really addressed the football end of things, of them being successful there, which is most important, like Tony said, is wins and losses.
Yeah, I think really what it boils down to is driving the identity of the team. And I just don't think this team ever came in. I don't think, you know, starting with the coaching staff, this team ever really came in and said, this is who we are as a roster, as a football team. Like I said, on the field, you know what I mean? Like, this is who we are on the field. This is what we're going to do. Everything was reactionary. And you hear it from, you know, players like Daron Payne, even who is admitted on the record that a lot of times he goes out there in a game and the first little bit of it, you know, it could be the first quarter, first couple of drives, first half, he kind of just feels out the pace of the game. And then once that happens, he absorbs the pace of the game, and then he comes out and he attacks it. And that just kind of shows you this is a team that, to me, looks very externally motivated. And when you look at how they compete against teams like the Philadelphia Eagles, scoring 30 plus, losing by 1 score margins in both those games, but then they get run out of their own house by the Chicago Bears, that to me looks like an organization that is externally motivated. They don't have an internal engine that drives them and tells them this is who we are, this is what we're going to do. They let their opponent dictate the pace and how they're going to respond to that pace. And again, when you're reactionary like that, you never come in on the offensive. You're always on the defensive, and you're always just kind of one step behind because you're waiting for your opponent to swing before you decide what kind of punch you want to throw. And look, in my first career, you know, in the Army, I had some really, really good commanders, and in the military sense, your company commanders, your unit commanders are like your coaches, and then the soldiers on the field, those are your players, and obviously the field is the battlefield, right? I've had some really good commanders. I've also had some really bad commanders, right? And Tony, you know what it's like to play for bad commanders, and like you said, the players or the soldiers have to then bring it together. And I've had conversations with soldiers during my first career where I said, listen, Don't worry about what that commander is saying. Look, take the message, take the intent, do all that stuff. Nod your head up and down, be respectful, do all that stuff. But when it comes down to it, it's on us, and it's on us to do the right thing. We know what needs to be done, and it's on us to get the job done. So like you said, Tony, it's not just on the coaches. It's not just on the players. The players don't have an excuse either. The coaches don't have an excuse either. The organization certainly doesn't have an excuse. Every layer has to take accountability for it. But guess what? If those players on the field say, guys, this is what we need to do, we need to have a plan. If the coaches don't have a plan, we got to have a plan. They go on the field and you're going to execute better. But if the players allow themselves to be misguided by coaches that don't have a roadmap to where they're trying to get, that's on the players. You allowed yourself to be led astray. You didn't get led astray because you're an innocent victim. You got to pull up your pants, you got to strap on your cleats, and you got to go out there and do the job. So every layer has failed in that venture. Now, ultimately, it's going to fall on Ron Rivera and the coaching staff. And the coaching staffs across the league and across all the sports understand that if you don't have a roster that's going to lead themselves, you got to be the leader. Again, you got to have a dog somewhere. For years, Bill Belichick in New England was that dog. Everybody rallied around him. The pack rallied around Bill Belichick. We've seen what's happened the last few years. Maybe Tom Brady was actually the dog, because since he's left, that pack is kind of spread out a little bit. They're not as tight as they used to be. So we kind of see that, that kind of thing happening. But when you look at the Bill Parcells and you look at, the John Gruden's early on in his career, you look at some of the most successful coaches, look at the Houston Texans. DeMeco Ryans is the biggest dog in the Houston Texans organization right now. That team is rallying around him. Now, as things develop, they're going to need Will Anderson Jr., CJ Stroud to become those dogs in the locker room, become those leaders of men, because that's how you're going to sustain that success. But if you don't have it from one level, you got to have it from the other level. This team hasn't had it from any level.
You said something very important, and you said, Don, I think you said it, that Payne says he go out and he look at the floor of the game. Right there, that battle is lost. I don't look at the floor of the game. I make the flow. If I'm going out there and I'm supposed to be one of the best pass rushers in the game, I'm insulted if you don't double team me. I'm not waiting to see if the game goes right, because that's what the offense want to do to the defense anyway, is dictate to you the defense that they want you to play, because you're afraid of the runner, you're afraid of the pass, you're afraid of the play action, you're afraid of cover two. You don't do that. You go out, each person, I wanted to dominate every time I went out. I wanted them to say, look, I got to deal with this dude. Not that they're going to make me do a certain way. And that's what this team, all these individuals we had on there that should be dominating, did not. And that's the bottom line. So when they can get rid of coaches, they can get rid of players, they get whoever's left here. And I always use New England as an example, because my first year there, we went something like 2-14 or 2-12. They got rid of all of us but 7 people. And we turned it around the next year. So you know what? That's what has to happen. We're going to quit crying about this spilled milk. Our next podcast, we're going to talk about the teams that's playing. But if you look at those teams, you look at each one of them, you got to look at the organization to begin with. Because the foundation you build on is the one that you're going to fall with. And if the foundation doesn't have anything, you know my saying, Donna, if love's not being served at the table, you got to leave.
Tony, I know it's almost time for us to leave, but I wanted to just kind of like touch a little bit on the offense. The offensive line gave up so far 61 sacks on the season. The defense had 39. You look at Sam Howard, he basically started 17 straight games. I mean, at the beginning of the year, you saw him do great things. You look at the Philadelphia Eagle game, 31 to 38 loss to the Eagles. He had 397 yards, 4 touchdowns. The Patriots, the 20-17 win, 325 yards, 1 touchdown. Then Seattle, 26-29 loss, 312, 3 touchdowns. But he fell apart basically after that Giants loss where they lost 31-19. It seems that that's when everything started trickling down for him. So in short, Tony and David, just in some final words on the offense, because David, we'll have to bring you back on to talk about those 5 top 100 picks for the 2024 draft for the Commanders and what they should do with those, because that's going to be pretty important. So we won't get into that. But when you look at this last game against Dallas, and everybody is hoping that they lose that game so that they will end up in the second place in the draft. But I'm about winning. I'm not about, draft spots and all of that. It's about winning for me. But when you look at that last game and you look at Sam, is he the quarterback of the future of this team? How do you all, in short, see, Tony, I'll start with you, and then David, you jump in. How do you see this offense where Sam Howard just kind of like fell apart after that Giants game? And then, the last game of the season against the Dallas Cowboys, they can be the spoilers because the Cowboys need to win that in order to win the division. So, Tony, offensively, 61 sacks given up. We know that the offensive line didn't hold up, but that could be some of the problems with Sam, definitely.
You hear me choking right now because I can't.
Yeah, we all choking.
I'm going to tell you what, if you take a look at it and you look at the situation, and not just the coaches, not everybody, and we keep saying it over and over, anytime you give up 61 sacks, a quarterback is going to get gunshot sooner or later. At the same time, they pay you not to get gunshot. They pay you to stand in the middle of the battle and fight. So if he's going to be the quarterback of the future, he got to learn how to do that. When we had our quarterbacks here, if we had a quarterback that was getting hit a lot, we ran a play called the dash. Joe Theismann ran it better than anyone I have seen it, where they go to the outside, sit up with their guard at the center, have a block out there, and then you scan the field. They need to do that with him, make him more mobile, make him more, give him opportunity to use his athletic ability. At the same time, if you're going to be the leader of the team, not just the quarterback position, but every position, you got to have somebody that's the leader, and they're going to help the other ones get through it. We did not see it. Everybody was talking about what we all should do, but nobody was doing it. So that's what I said. If you're going to have it, if you're going to be paid like a winner, you play like a winner. If you're going to be paid like a loser, then that's what's going to happen.
You got it, Tony. David.
No, I mean 1,000%, right? The old cliche is pressure is cumulative, right? And that's not just in one game. That's over the lifetime of the season and even over the lifetime of a career. I mean, you can see quarterbacks get completely gun shy and just stay that way. And that's really the concern with Sam Howell is, early in the season, like you pinpointed, right? That New York Giants game. That's the game, Donna, that I pinpointed as well. I think that second Giants game, Sam really went out there with a mission, and his mission was to show that he was a better quarterback than he was the first time they played the Giants, and that he was going to be the guy that they could put the team on his shoulders, and he was going to carry them to victory. It didn't happen. It didn't work. And I think he's been trying to make up for it ever since. And what we started seeing now is a quarterback that doesn't trust his protection, doesn't trust his reads, doesn't trust the play design, and honestly doesn't trust himself. And that is horrible. Like that's the worst thing you can do to a quarterback, or that's the worst place a quarterback can be in, is a place where he doesn't trust anything that is happening around him. And I don't think you can get that back within the same season. I think it's going to take an off season. It's going to take the coaching changes. It's going to take another training camp, all this stuff to try to get that back. Now, whether or not Sam is the quarterback of the future, that's the problem. You're not going to know if this is a long-term problem for Sam Howell now until next training camp. And really, you're not going to know it until next regular season. So if you're the Washington Commanders, you can't responsibly, if you're going to responsibly steward this organization, you can't say we're putting all of our eggs in Sam Howell in 2024 again, because you have no idea what you're going to get in 2024. Exactly. You can do all the interviews, you can do all the dry runs, all the off-season workouts, all of that stuff. That is not going to tell you who the Warrior is on the field until he gets on the field of battle again. And that's not happening until September. So the question is this: do you think he can be? If he can be, then I think you go the veteran route. Maybe you go a 5th, 6th round quarterback to develop on the back end, and you go that route. You bring in a bridge quarterback potentially to plug that gap. If you don't think that Sam Howell can recover from this, then that's where the Caleb Williams conversation, Jaden Daniels conversation comes into play. Or you still go veteran and you try to bridge that quarterback gap for a couple of years using a veteran plug, which we know Commanders fans aren't going to enjoy because we've seen that with Ryan Fitzpatrick, Carson Wentz, all that stuff. But those are your options from an organizational standpoint. And really what it boils down to is, what do the new decision makers believe about Sam Howell? Me, I think he's got the tools. You see the arm strength, the decision making can be solid. The ability to play freely can be there. Tony, I think you hit the nail right on the head with the scheme. You got to move him. We're screaming this with Taylor Heineke too. You got a quarterback that's not comfortable in the pocket, not confident in the pocket. Move him. Design the pocket rollouts. Design the runs. Design the play action. Get him where he's comfortable, and that's in open space where he knows there's no danger around him. We don't see it enough. So if you're going to stick with Sam, you need to bring in an offensive play caller that's going to do those things to help that quarterback. Plus, the dude is 6'1". I'm 5'10", and I'll tell you right now, 6'1" with Sam Howell might be stretching the ruler just a little bit, okay? But bottom line is, I stand next to Nick Gates, who's 6'3", 6'4", whatever he is. I can see over this guy. You need to move the pocket. If you're going to have a shorter quarterback, you got to move the pocket. You got to do those things to help him accentuate his talent. So if you're asking me if Sam Howell has the talent to lead this team in the future, he absolutely has the talent. The question now is, does he have the mentality coming back next year, which you can't answer until next September? And is this team going to do the things to facilitate him being at his best? If those two things are no, or you think they're no, then you got to go a different direction.
Hey, David, where can they catch you on social media?
Oh man, social media, Twitter, D Harrison 82, Threads, D Harrison _82. I'm not very active on social media though. So I mean, commandercountry.com, where I'm writing about the Commanders, and then Locked On Commanders. Those are probably the best places to find me.
And Tony, as you say, we don't say.
We never say goodbye. And Dave, we want you back soon. And the fans, we want you back as well. We never say goodbye. We say in the minute.
In the minute.